How do you feel about recently on Netflix? Anyways, there was that MH370
I
documentary,
watched
and
that. Yeah.
yeah, and how did you feel about that? I mean, like, there's a lot of focus on the pilot and such,
Yep.
and like, does that seem realistic to you, or any thoughts about
I,
what happened there?
I you know that show, which I did see, and I had talked with some colleagues at work about it. Um, the way that it was presented was definitely seemed a little bit like entertainment. I think they
Mm,
had some, they definitely tried to cover the facts, and they brought in some journalists and um, some other sort of credible voices. you know, I can't speculate on what happened to that airplane.
mm,
It was a massive disaster, and then followed right on, a short time later by the one that was downed over the Ukraine.
mm,
Um,
yeah.
so a big mystery. It's hard to sort of piece together what happened. I mean, they presented some it was a little bit more conjecture than maybe I was ready for in
Mm,
that four-part series,
yeah.
but they sort of presented some, here's what could have happened. As a pilot, just knowing how the aviation system works, often it's the sort of the least salacious thing that, or the least, interesting thing that is usually like, if they had an issue, and that's where they lost, contact with the crew on radar, and we also have, we have other systems that track the aircraft. I think they lost contact, and lost the signal somewhere north of the
Mm,
airport. um, they there was some suggestion that maybe there was wreckage out in the water there.
mm,
As a pilot, that's sort of my first thought, is if dispatch and air traffic control lose you at a position, that's probably where where the
mm,
wreckage would be if you lost an aircraft. Um, all these stories of them, navigating around different
yeah.
military airspace and ending up in mainland, North Russia
Kazakhstan or
somewhere,
whatever.
Kazakhstan, or then going down towards the South Pole. That's less likely, I think.
So you're saying
As a
so as a like, because that's where most of the search took place, right? Is in the South
Yeah,
Indian Ocean, and
yeah.
so you're I don't want to get too much into this, I get, but as a pilot, like, when those signals got lost, like, how is that possible? Like, on a modern aircraft, like, what would it take for that to happen?
I mean, it would be a catastrophic failure, a fire, or
Okay.
you look at other incidents where there was where aircraft crashed, they were lost over the ocean. Air France, as an example, if you hit extreme turbulence, which is very unlikely. We have all kinds of systems on board now,
Mm,
and weather forecasting that we avoid those areas. Swiss Air, as an example, was a systems failure that led to a fire. That would have been a scenario where you would have fallen off the screen, so to say.
mm,
But there's so much surveillance out there now in the form of satellite, ADSB, which is a system that communicates with the ground without radar, radar systems, both civilian and military. Over the ocean, yeah, there's not that many eyes on you, but we're still communicating with our company all the time
mm,
through satellites all the way across the ocean. So you know, to be lost in the way that they're claiming, that the aircraft, dropped off um, communications at a certain point and then ended up so many hundreds or thousands of miles away. Uh, as a professional pilot, it's very hard to believe. Well, it's not impossible. Anything's possible. But
mm.
looking at it with my sort of pilot hat on, um, I would say, look for the more likely explanation, which
Yeah.
is some kind of catastrophic failure. Um, I think the tough part with that story is there's these sort of other little bits of information
Mm,
that don't line up with just
mm,
a failure over the ocean, and the airplane went down.
yeah. If you're in, like, if the scenario happens where you do lose all communication, there's that catastrophic failure. What's your next step as a pilot?
Well, I mean, so there's, keep in mind, like, there's layers of communication. So we have radios on board. So at any
Mm,
moment we can reach out to another aircraft. Like, let's say we're headed to Hawaii,
mm,
and we're midway there. We can talk to other aircraft, and there's always dozens of other aircraft in our
mm,
area. So we can reach out to United or American or Lufthansa or whoever happens to
mm,
be in the area at the time and have a conversation with another crew, and they can relay, hey, there's something going on here.
mm,
We need some help. So that's one way. We have a satellite phone on board. Any airplane
mm,
that's flying over the ocean would have SATCOM, so we can reach out through the satellite phone network to our company or to air traffic control. So
mm,
totally different system. There's radar, and radar coverage is not global.
mm-hmm.
And we also have the aircraft sending its own telemetry data to our maintenance system or maintenance departments, to our dispatchers. So at any given time, without radar, without radio, without our text data link, which we can always text message people on the ground, they
Yeah.
can still see where we are. So there's many independent systems that keep track of these aircraft. Even the engines themselves have a conversation with our team on the ground without
Mm,
any interference or any cockpit switch or screen. They send their health data, so their pressures and temperatures and hundreds of other
yeah.
lines of data flowing out of those aircraft back to the ground, and many different channels. So high frequency, medium and low frequency radio waves. We mentioned satellites. So it's just it's hard to believe that you could shut all those systems down. It's not possible, certainly in the 737, for me to turn off all those systems.
Mm.
Um, they just run automatically.
It's so I feel like you just gave so much more valuable information than like that documentary did.
Well, maybe,
It, it,
maybe.
it
I mean, they were speculating that someone could go downstairs and start,
yeah,
you this is it's a definitely a more fun story to watch on
sure. Yeah,
Netflix. I mean, I
yeah.
enjoyed
It
it.
was captivating. I enjoyed it for
It's
sure.
very
Yeah.
captivating, but
Yeah.
for that to happen, and again, I'm not a systems expert. I'm
Yeah.
a line pilot and a former union leader. So I definitely have sort of the operational background,
Mm,
but just sort of from a common sense uh, perspective with a little bit of my professional background. I always sort of think, well, go start with the more likely
mm.
scenario, which is some kind of
Something happened in the
catastrophic failure.
South
Something
China
happened to the
Sea. Yeah.
aircraft.
Yeah.
Something happened over the ocean, and
Yeah.
that's unfortunately and very sadly where the airplane
Mm,
still is now. They searched that area, and then they expanded their search based on some telemetry data that they had from the engine. I guess that's another. You can't not search that area if you've got some information that doesn't line up. And I think that's the confusing thing about that story is, two search areas that are so far apart based
mm-hmm.
on some signal data.
Mm-hmm.
But signal data isn't always reliable. So where does most of the evidence point? Unless there was something compelling, which I know that they did find some parts that had washed ashore, I think in East Africa somewhere.
Yeah. Madagascar and yeah.
Right. Um, but one of the pilots that I was flying with, she was mentioning, yeah, but to not have a data plate on it, like to not be actually able to say this is definitively from that triple
Mm-hmm.
seven,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you know,
It's a little bit sketch. Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely a stretch. So I think as a professional pilot, unfortunately, it's an unsatisfying answer, but we just don't know. We don't have the evidence. We don't know where the wreckage is, and we may never know. And it may be just one of those unsolved aviation mysteries.
Yeah.
So
But your perspective is so helpful. I feel like all they need to do is have some real good pilots that they could talk to provide that information. Like the way they presented that documentary made it sound so speculative, right? Like the way you just explained it sounds so much more common sense, and just the question around like what would it take to actually shut down those systems? Like you just said, there are some things you as a pilot could never do, right?
not certainly not on the 737, and Definitely not on other fleet types I've flown. I mean,
Yeah.
unless you're in the hangar with the access to the aviation bay or the avionics bay, pardon me,
Mm-hmm.
on the aircraft that I fly currently, the 737 Max, you can only access it from outside the airplane.
Mm.
So, and I shouldn't say that. Maybe if you were start pulling up floorboards, you can get to it
Yeah.
underneath.
Yeah.
But there's no hatch, and we can get
Yeah.
down from the flight deck into that bay. So, some older aircrafts you could get down there, but then once you're
Mm.
down there, the pilots don't have the training
Mm.
to identify components and then
Mm.
let alone plug in a computer or plug in some kind of
And
device to
fly,
interfere
yeah,
with
to
those. Like
Kazakhstan. Yeah.
that is a it seems more like a Mission Impossible
Yeah.
script
Yeah. Yeah.
than reality. But
Yeah.
again, I never say anything's impossible. I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
look at that and sort of say, okay, we just don't know enough about what happened.